Welcome to meeting number 3 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. Given the ongoing pandemic situation and in light of the recommendations from health authorities as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19, 2021, to remain healthy and safe, all those attending the meeting in person are to maintain 2-meter physical distancing, must wear a non-medical mask when circulating in the room, and it is highly recommended that the mask be worn at all times, including when seated. Must maintain proper hand hygiene by using the provided hand sanitizers at the room entrance. As the chair, I will be enforcing these measures for the duration of the meeting, and I thank members in advance for their cooperation. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately, and we will ensure interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. The raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen can be used at any time if you wish to speak or alert the chair. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in a committee room. Keep in mind the Board of Internal Economy's guideline for mask use and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the proceedings and verification officer. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on the mute. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. With regard to a speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do our best to maintain consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating in person or virtually. Today, the committee is continuing its study on the recruitment and acceptance rates of foreign students. It's my pleasure to introduce the witnesses for the first panel today. We have 3 witnesses for our first panel. I would like to welcome Lau Jensen Dang Zalan, immigration lawyer. And also we have with us V. William Tao, Canadian immigration lawyer and co-founder of the Arenas Foundation. Our third witness for first panel is Christian Fotong, chair of the board of directors, and also Jared Maltais, interim executive director representing Canadian Alliance of Student Association. I would like to welcome our witnesses and thank them for appearing before this committee today as we continue our study on the recruitment and acceptance rate of foreign students. I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Interpretation in this video conference will work very much like in a regular committee meeting. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on the mute. All the witnesses will be provided with 5 minutes for their opening remarks, and then we will go into round of questioning from our MPs. So with that, I will once again welcome our witnesses, and I would pass the floor to Mr. Lau Jensen Dang Zalan, immigration lawyer. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You can please start.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bonjour tout.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lau Jensen Dang Zalan, and I'm speaking to you from Toronto, recognizing that I am the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of New Credit. I'd like to point out that I've provided a brief submission that includes appendices and tables that provide more details on the numbers. I'm highlighting a few key facts. I would like to clarify a few points of statistics that are troubling, and I refer you to the statistics in Schedule A of the brief I mentioned. You also see a map of the world that shows the trend of refusal for countries in Africa. Also note that we see West Africa almost completely in red. These are Francophone countries. The reason for Africa's underperformance is a mystery, and I refer you to Appendix A, or Schedule A, and we try to look.
I think both the French and English are coming at the same. So.
Testing 1, 2. This is the English channel, English language, English interpretation. Testing 1, 2.
English language selected the number, or are you?
Works for us.
Mr. Jensen, have you selected the French language?
Okay. We will continue. I believe it's a problem on our side. I apologize for that. Please continue and we'll verify.
Please go ahead.
Donc,
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we tried to see if there was a link between economic factors such as the GDP per capita, purchasing power parity considered, and we found that yes, there is a positive correlation. However, there's a relationship only applies to numbers between $3,000 and $15,000. That is, the rule does not apply to French-speaking African countries because the vast majority of these countries do not fall within this range. That is why I hope that the committee will ask for data. And that is why I've tried to identify other factors that may explain the divergence in acceptance rate. Here are some hypotheses. We seem to indicate that the media suggested that Chinook, a processing tool developed in-house by IRCC, was responsible for the decline. We'll talk about Chinook, but Chinook is an Excel-based software. The purpose of this software is to process visa applications in bulk. If you look at Appendix C, you can see that if it's used in an office, and so in summary, according to limited information available, it's not clear if there's a causal link or not between Chinook and the acceptance rate. What is clear is that we see a decline in confidence in the system when talking to clients for international students. So how do you explain this? I hope that you will ask for IRCC data. Is there another factor? Well, I'm wondering if there's a lack of resources for the visa office in Africa. The study permits from African countries are not processed in the same country. I refer you to Schedule C. Let's note that applications from main source countries such as China, India, Philippines, USA, with the exception of South Korea and Iran, are processed locally. Some countries even have several visa offices. In French-speaking Africa, most applications are processed in Dakar, Accra, or Dar es Salaam, and mostly in Dakar. It should be noted that the advantage of having an application processed in your country is that the decision makers are more attuned to the realities on the ground. Moreover, it's no secret that inter-African racism does exist. Mixing applications as if they were homogeneous is a big problem. So, this is the question. Is it about racism? All of this is against the backdrop of the recent IRCC report on anti-racism. Widespread internal references to certain African countries as the Dirty 30 were noted. The committee may wish to inquire further with the IRCC to list these countries and to see if this corresponds. It would be interesting to see. IRCC faces more judicial review if the department does not act quickly. Having our already overburdened courts adjudicate study permits applications is more expensive and a waste of our tax dollars. I have 4 points of recommendation. 1, appropriate resources must be allocated for the processing of visa applications. 2, we submitted to the same committee last year that the IRCC must collect race-based data. 3, offices with high refusal rates should be automatically audited. On this point, this audit should be conducted by a third party. However, if the committee recommends the creation of an immigration ombudsman, this monitoring function could be incorporated into this person's mandate. Or perhaps the Auditor General could be tasked by Parliament to investigate. We see that most of the requests are dealt with in Dakar for Francophone Africa. So what's happening in this office? Are there measures trying to ensure impartiality? And lastly, immigration. must undertake genuine public consultations on the deployment of technologies such as Chinook and AI. We need a transparency. Stakeholder engagement is critical. IRCC must engage with immigration and privacy lawyers and ensure protection of privacy. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Deng Xalan. Before I go to our next witness, just want to indicate for all the witnesses and the members that I will show you like a 1-minute card and then a 30-second card and then a stop card. So please make sure that once I show you a 30 seconds, start wrapping up. So we will now proceed to Mr. Tao. Mr. Tao is representing Canadian immigration lawyer and co-founder of the Arenas Foundation. Mr. Tao, you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am presenting today from the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Kaika nations in Burnaby, BC. In my 5 minutes today, I will highlight the key points that I put forth in my written brief, focusing on expanding on my 3 recommendations. Like Minister Fraser, and a few years behind, I've only just started my French studies, but it's important for me to say, nous ne devons pas oublier l'intersection des francophones.
We should not forget the intersection of African francophones, racial, linguistic, geographical, gendered, and ageist in its impacts. We cannot forget the importance of these problems for Quebecers and francophones in Canada. This has affected these communities in a disproportional fashion.
My statement today is to summarize that we have broken links between a history of anti-Black racism and discrimination that has embedded itself today into a system which disproportionately discriminates against applicants in the Global South. And this threatens to codify itself in tomorrow's artificial intelligence-driven system. In my paper, I discussed the historical context, but I'll first begin by emphasizing how important it is for this committee to understand the present-day context for applicants to counterbalance IRCC's narratives of privacy, security, and efficiency. African and Global South applicants have greater barriers in proving their cases, higher documentary requirements, and higher rates of refusal, as my colleague Lou has just presented. Refusals are rendered on obscure financial grounds or prejudiced assumptions that applicants will not return to their home countries after their studies. To be clear, and as idealistic as I am, I do not believe we can entirely eliminate discrimination in immigration, as immigration is a process of state-endorsed discrimination based on nationality and travel document requirements. I do believe, however, in acknowledging this, that this increased transparency. Also, to expand on what Minister Fraser was asked in a recent press conference, IRCC is utilizing a tool called Chinook. What we have learned so far is that Chinook is being applied most frequently in the Global South's high-volume visa offices. It allows for bulk refusals by the hundreds, where applicants are sorted via the Excel-based tool by country of nationality, age, gender, and marital status. Officers' working notes, where individual factual assessments are often performed, are deleted. Risk flags and local visa word flags that are not vetted by any independent expert become quasi-law. Applicants are left with these templated refusals and recourse only to the federal court, which, while successful, is often cost prohibitive. Applicants from Africa and the Global South also do not have any other access to options to immigrate, temporarily or permanently. Study permits have become the only hope, one simultaneously being taken advantage of by recruiters and agents acting as unauthorized immigration practitioners. This is the backdrop for IRCC's move to artificial intelligence, which threatens to further codify, make less transparent, and subject to even less scrutiny the biases and flaws of our human-created foundation. This system will have the greatest impact on applicants from Africa and the Global South, and the stories of suicide, financial harm, and students unable to cope with Canadian immigration requirements will worsen if we are not proactive. To this end, I have 3 recommendations. First, ensure Chinook, which I believe runs on automated processes and is artificial intelligence, goes through a proper algorithmic impact assessment, AIA, and other safeguards, such as an independent review. A more public-facing, transparent AIA process also needs to be performed before we roll out the expansion of AI, which is currently used in India and China.
Point d'ordre, Madame la Présidente. Je pense qu'il y a eu un problème d'interprétation. Si on pouvait revenir.
I think we had an interpretation issue. Could he go back?
Je pense que c'était juste un moment.
I think it was just a moment during the presentation.
Ça, c'est juste le son qui a été interrompu.
The sound was cut. There was... I was saying that the sound was cut for a few seconds during the presentation. So I was wondering if we could go back 30 seconds in the speech.
I'll request the witness. 1 second. Let us check first. There was some issue from the witness end, so we will request the witness to please start, and maybe if you can go 30 seconds before, we will give you time to please start. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll start with the Africans from Africa and the Global South often do not have access to other options to immigrate, temporarily or permanently. Study permits have become the only hope, one simultaneously taken advantage of by recruiters and agents acting as unauthorized immigration practitioners. This is the foundation for IRCC's move to artificial intelligence, which threatens to further codify, make less transparent, and subject to even less scrutiny the biases and flaws of our human-created foundations. This system will have the greatest impact on applicants from Africa and the Global South, and the stories of suicide, financial harm, and students unable to cope with Canadian immigration will worsen if we are not proactive. To this end, I have 3 recommendations. First, ensure Chinook, which I believe runs on automated processes and is artificial intelligence, goes through an algorithmic impact assessment called an AIA, and other safeguards such as an independent race equity review. A more public-facing, transparent AIA process also needs to be performed before rolling out the expansion of AI to visa offices in Africa and the Global South. Second, I'm a proponent of the regulation of education consulting and recruitment. I take this position knowing it is perhaps economically unpopular, jurisdictionally difficult, given the role provinces also play. Yet we are dealing with vulnerable youth and families, often racialized folks, with their exorbitant tuition fees being offshored by agents who practice immigration without authorizations. Our institutions are far too complicit in this system. Third, we need to properly study anti-Black racism as a series of mistakes made and lessons learned to help us inform a forward-looking approach to issues such as social capital flight, colonialism, and climate migration, and how this will impact immigration moving forward. We need to disaggregate the modern data we have by race and by visa office before we chart new policies. And finally, as you can see by my recommendations, I don't think we should solely focus on improving numbers by however many percent without tackling the underlying issues. To borrow a medical term in these appropriate times, we should be treating the cause, not the symptoms of the problem. If I were to summarize into one overarching good first tangible step, I would say the appointment of an independent ombudsperson or immigration
Sorry
commission.
for interrupting. Your time is up, so you will get some opportunity during the round of questioning, and then you can speak.
Okay. Subject to my questions, those are my brief remarks.
Okay.
Thank you.
With that, we will now proceed to our last witness for this panel, Mr. Photong, representing Canadian Alliance of Students Association. Mr. Photong, you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You can please proceed.
Thank you, and good morning, Madam Chair, esteemed committee members, and fellow witnesses. I'd like to begin my statement by acknowledging that I speak to you today from Mesquite-Wisconsin, or Beaver Hill House, what is now called Edmonton, on Treaty 6 territory. My name is Christian Photang, and I am the chair of the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations, or CASA. I'm also the vice president, external affairs at the University of Alberta Students' Union. I'm in my 4th year of a Bachelor of Science degree, majoring in biology and minoring in psychology. I'm joined today by our interim executive director, Gerald Malte, who will be supporting me in fielding your important questions today. CASA is a nonpartisan, not-for-profit national advocacy organization that represents students at colleges, polytechnics, and universities from coast to coast to coast. Through a formal partnership with the Quebec Students' Union, we are a trusted and evidence-informed voice that represents 365,000 post-secondary students across Canada. I would like to thank the committee for inviting us to speak today on this particularly important topic, which has serious implications for the future of Canadian post-secondary education, as well as the Canadian economy at large. As you know, international students are a critical part of the post-secondary community in Canada. They enrich the educational experiences on post-secondary campuses and facilitate an international forum for the sharing of ideas, expertise, research, and scholarship. International students are also significant contributors to the regional economies. Despite their much higher tuition fees, the international student community in Canada has grown at a faster rate than domestic students. As of 2019, there were 827,000 international students studying in Canada, supporting nearly 170,000 Canadian jobs and contributing $21.6 billion to the national GDP. In addition to the value they inject into the Canadian economy, international students who decided to stay in Canada after their studies are essential to addressing the ongoing skilled worker shortage across the country. This issue will only become more acute as baby boomers retire and more skilled jobs go unfilled due to Canada's shrinking domestic labor pool. Recognizing this, it's important that the Government of Canada develop a clear recruitment and retention strategy to help address the ongoing shortage of skilled Canadian labor. Indeed, according to a 2018 survey, 60% of international students say they plan to remain and work in Canada once they graduate. When it comes to recruitment, it's important to recognize that Canada's post-secondary education system competes in an increasingly competitive international environment for talent. An advantage to emphasize is Canada's officially bilingual complexion and our ability to offer a high-quality education to French-speaking international students around the world, a uniquely Canadian opportunity. Quebec is the leading destination for these speaking international students, but there are other Francophone educational institutions across the country. At Campus Saint-Jean in Alberta, where I speak to you from, we are also feeling the effects of these processing disparities. To increase the recruitment and retention of French-speaking international students, fundamental changes need to be made to the Canadian study permitting and immigration process. As heard by this committee in late 2020, the study permit applications of French-speaking international students from Africa are disproportionately denied when compared to non-African countries. A reevaluation of IRCC resources is needed to rebalance the system to serve international students looking to study in either of Canada's official languages. That said, international students of both official languages face many other barriers when applying for their study permits. The process continues to be extremely onerous for any young adult unfamiliar with the Canadian immigration system to understand. CASA believes that IRCC must deploy additional capacity to study permit processing during peak season and look to simplify their messaging to international students to make it easier to understand. There are multiple reforms the Government of Canada could implement immediately to make Canada a more attractive destination for international students of both official language. This includes, first, allowing international students to participate in internship or co-op under their existing study permit. Secondly, additional coordination to ensure all study permits have consistent working conditions and those who are eligible to work can seamlessly obtain a social insurance number without delay. Third, increased recognition of Canadian educational experience within the Express Entry program. Fourth, the expansion of eligibility for off-campus employment to international students studying part-time. And finally, reforming the Canada Summer Jobs program to allow international students living in Canada to participate in summer employment opportunities funded by the federal government. These recommendations are essential for making Canada a more attractive destination for international students of both official languages. So thank you for your consideration, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thanks a lot. Thanks to all the witnesses for their opening remarks. We will now proceed to our first round of questioning, and we will start with Mr. Seaback. Mr. Seaback, you will have 6 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for your testimony here today. I found it really interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about the Chinook tool, which I'm not particularly familiar with. But what we heard in committee on Tuesday was that the rejection rates for students generally from African Francophone nations has gone from a rejection rate of around 50, I think, since 2015 up to close to, I think it was 80 or 83%. It's also, from what I heard today, the Chinook software came in 2018. So from where I'm standing, it would appear that the Chinook tool, I can't say it's directly correlated, but it certainly seems like it might be. So I'd like to hear, I know you've talked about, say, getting an AIA done. I mean, what data would we need from IRCC in order to assess our belief that the Chinook tool is part of the problem? And any of the witnesses, if you could please give me your comments.
Lou, I think this question might be best directed to you because I think you have the stats first, and then I'll answer.
I could talk about the stats for sure, and then I'll talk about the, what we can seek, as Mr. Seaback suggested. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Seaback. And you're right, the refusal rates have substantially gone up. Per my count, I just disaggregated Francophone Africa. Basically, what we're seeing is that there's a 27% essentially approval rate coming in from Francophone Africa from 2016 to 2020. That is in contrast to the main source countries of Canada, which is at around 70%. That that division, that gap is too big. In terms of like what we're looking for in terms of accountability and what Chinook is, first of all, unfortunately, I'm very sad to report that we actually don't know enough to ask the good questions, but we do have some indications on what AI good governance could look like when we start asking questions about Chinook. For example, during the conference at Acadie in Montreal back in November, Richard Kurland, another immigration lawyer from Vancouver, was suggesting that there needs to be some sort of backstop internally, even at the very least internally at IRCC, to have some sort of accountability, how these algorithms actually work. What's the assessment? And I'd like to make a contrast. So there are two programs that I mentioned in my oral submissions. The first is Chinook. The second one is the artificial intelligence driven advanced data analytics. And Will can talk about that a little bit more. Pardon me. The latter, the advanced data analytics, actually has some QA backing it, whereas Chinook, we absolutely have no idea. We've tried for the last 60 days to do some ATIPs, and what we're getting is a lot of pushback. We keep getting extension delays of about 180 days or even a year on our requests, essentially trying to push the issue forward. So we can't really comment as to what variables we need. Perhaps the committee can actually get that data in
you want to provide
ATIPs.
Could you provide the committee with your ATIPs, and then we can maybe pose some of those questions directly here at the committee?
Absolutely.
Thanks very much. Mr. Tao, were you going to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Seaback. I would just like to add that from my perspective, we do have to suss out the public-facing element of what IRCC is telling the public and putting out. We're not going to automate refusals. We're not going to do any of these things, versus what's going on behind the scenes via the policy playbook, which I included as part of my brief. Internally, I think IRCC is looking to automate refusals, is looking to try and remove humans, no human in the loop. And I think for me, the concerning aspect is until we put Chinook on the table and have proper independent consultations through possibly a commission or a ombudsperson, these will ingrade into artificial intelligence and into algorithms that then become impenetrable. And especially when you litigate, especially when we do all these tools, if we don't have the back data, we are unable to actually pursue those processes. So I second what Lou said, and I believe that this data needs to be put on the table in order, and it doesn't have to be public. It can be private in a secure setting, but it needs to be put on the table in order for us to decide the next path forward with Chinook and the future replacement. Thank you.
And I'm going to hazard a guess that this isn't a new issue. It's 2022. These rates have been getting worse since 2015. Have you, your organizations, have you been raising this with the government, raising the alarm bells, saying we've got a significant problem here?
Mr. Seaback, I'd like to respond. The immigration actually only released the information about Chinook in a litigation case, which I actually peripherally was a part of last year. So we're actually just in September of last year is when we really started mobilizing. So the fact that this was started in 2018 and 3 years was under wraps, there's no single Google search on this term Chinook, for me was really troubling. This should have been brought to stakeholders as soon as the idea came up for Chinook. That is my perspective.
Go ahead.
Quick,
If I may, Mr.
10
Seaback.
seconds.
Yeah, just a quick 10 seconds. If we're looking for historical origins of Chinook, one might want to ask Mr. Mario Bellissimo in Toronto, who has done a detailed study in this. There is an origin story from the Manila Visa Office called Hiraya. Stats, we can't really talk about that until actually the Okran litigation came to the front.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. We will now proceed to Mr. Ali. Mr. Ali, you will have 6 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to invite each of the witnesses to comment on 3 observations made in an email my office received from international student recruitment staff at Ottawa University. First, they had noticed that struggle for African to get approved for a study permit in the past 3 years. They drew particular attention to the difficulty for Francophone applicants from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, and Senegal. For Anglophone students, they said that applicants from Nigeria face the similar difficulties. Second, they raised a concern that there seem to be 2 messages to applicants. One, we need new immigrants to Canada, and we offer the post-graduation work permit, end quote. But do not mention that that you want to stay in after your studies. A lot of African students are confused by these messages. Thirdly, they said that African applicants believe that Canadian universities have a say in accepting or refusing applicants regarding immigration. They suggested that it could be good to advertise that the 2 application processes, academic and immigration, are independent. Can you please comment on this? Thank you.
Who have you requested? Who would like to...
I actually invited, each of the witnesses to comment on this, to anyone to jump in.
Okay, so maybe Mr. Tao, you would like to start, or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to just focus on one part of the question and maybe leave some of the other witnesses to answer other parts. I think the dual intention element is definitely of major concern. There's a provision in to for dual intention, meaning that if I come to Canada temporarily, if I have a future permanent resident intention, that is permissible, as long as I can show that I can leave Canada at the end of my authorized stay. Unfortunately for students, the permanent residence pathway could be 5, 6, 7 years in the future. So that dual intention is not taken into consideration by the visa offices in a very significant way. Then there are these assumptions about the home country, the family that might be coming, and the economic conditions of the country that they're leaving, and that is prejudiced into refusal decisions. So I think the dual intention really needs a rethink in order for this provision to be successful. So I'll leave my comments on that dual intention piece.
So I could go next.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also wanted to touch upon dual intent because that certainly encapsulates a lot of the issues facing a lot of African and Francophone African, especially students coming in from, outside Canada to study. And it's very interesting that that is actually counterposable with the efforts that the government of Canada is doing abroad to recruit international students. Just recently, my articling student, Andrew Colton, and I attended virtually a conference in Manila talking about Come to Canada, and the ambassador, Peter MacArthur, actually, did the sales pitch to a lot of candidates to come to Canada, spend so much of your money. And immigration also talked about how easy the process is, but never talking about the possibility that this could be a very, very difficult path. And the dual intention issue, which was raised in the previous committee meeting, doesn't really make an assumption that they're going to violate, the international students are going to violate the laws in Canada, but it seems to me, in terms of my handling of African cases or cases coming in from Africa, that there is that presumption more so than those coming in from other parts of the world.
Mr. Futong, would you like to comment?
I can. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, MPLE, for the question. Yeah, just to echo what Mr. Dangzalan and Mr. Tao have said, I've heard situations from our deans here at CSJ say that they've been given funding from Citizenship and Immigration Canada to go out and recruit students in these African French-speaking countries and telling them come to Canada. There's opportunities and pathways for residency and citizenship, and then they do all these efforts, and universities use their fundings to go out and recruit these students. But then when the students do apply and when they do show up to apply for a study permit, they're told, oh well, we don't believe that you'll come back to your home country after you're done your studying, which is completely a paradoxical message to what they were told by their universities staff. So more transparency needs to be made by the government, and more communication needs to be done between IRCC, Immigration Canada, and the staffs on the ground to make sure that students are actually getting the correct information. If not, it's really a waste of resources, both for the government, both for the universities who going out there to try and recruit these students, and for us as students. So yeah, that's all I'll echo on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, do you still have time?
You have 30 seconds.
Okay, quickly, that program, Chinook, the IRCC had taken it. Can anyone comment that how, was there any procedure to, based on any studies or anything, how they have taken this program to put in place, implemented it? Can anyone comment on that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Ali. I'll answer quickly. Very little. From all the stats we've gotten, even from the affidavits that have been filed by RCC, there was very little legal oversight and stakeholder outreach. It's very much officer rules. So all the experiences of different visa officers and different visa posts correlated into one. But the problem is, as we know, depending on what visa office is, they're dealing with their own unique situations and their own prejudices. And to put them all on the table without an independent
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up.
Sorry.
We will have to proceed to our next member. Now we will proceed to Mr. Brunel Dessap for 6 minutes. Mr. Brunel Dessap, you can please go ahead.
Thank you so much for our witnesses that are here today. We know that this study is so important for foreign students and also for our institutions. So I'm very pleased that you're here with us, and this is something that I hold to heart. We're hearing a lot about Chinook today. I'm hearing about Chinook a lot. I'd like to continue on this because on Tuesday we were told that it was important to understand that before Chinook already there was a difference with African countries, the Francophone countries, especially in Western Africa. Is it possible that Chinook, by automating part of the job of the IRCC agents, is this crystallizing an inequity that already existed? Mr. Van Zelen, I'd like to hear you speak to this. Thank you. This is a really interesting question. The way that AI works through time is that what we see is that there are human prejudices that are then integrated within the AI system. So as Mr. Tao already said, the problem with the way that IRCC is proceeding with this system is that there's no countermeasures, there's no checks and balances to this, there's no quality audit. As we see with advanced analytics that is being used in the request for temporary residency. So yes, this is a problem because there's West Africa, but we don't have data. We don't have data as to how Chinook actually works. So what we have been able to obtain in the past 2 months are email exchanges because of ATIP requests, and so this has raised more questions than provided answers, and this is to your point. Yeah, so it comes back to, and you were talking about this in your opening statement, there's a lack of transparency at IRCC, and maybe this is why, maybe this is at the heart of many issues. Yes, it's a black box, absolutely, Mr. Duceppe. And so yourself, in your work, well, this is hindering your work. Answer, yes. Yes, we have a battle, especially with files with West African clients because we don't have statistics, we don't have the data showing how requests are being dealt with. With Chinook, we had a few ideas or more information with regards to the process, but we don't have a lot of information right now. Thank you. Another subject I wanted to deal with, I know that in Quebec, and maybe Mr. Dangzalan and Mr. Fortin could answer this question. In Quebec, $15 million are given out for foreign student bursaries. It's 2 times more than what the rest of Canada is giving. So we see that Quebec seems to believe in these students and does allocate resources so they're able to come and study here. And at the end of the line, they're refused by Ottawa. And so there's a member of the subcommittee that said maybe it was the fault of Quebec if there's so many refusals. And, well, this seems to be a deduction that doesn't really hold water. Could you comment on this?
And I'll also bring in Jared to add into this too. But from the stories I've heard, I've talked to some students here at CSJ, and they told me when they first came to study in Canada, they actually went to Quebec first, and were doing some of their education in Laval before maybe transferring to Alberta. And yeah, they said the distinction was clear. The supports that they were afforded in Quebec were much more different, much more visible, much more helpful than maybe what they were receiving in Alberta, or what they're receiving in the rest of the country. But I'll pass it forward to Jared if there's more that he can add to this as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for the question. I think Christian handled it well, but I would add that there is also a resourcing issue on the ground in some of these Francophone countries across Africa. What we've been hearing from students at some of our member campuses that are looking to come to Canada after applying from some of these Francophone countries, and there is just as you've heard in some of the introductory statements, there is just a resourcing issue in terms of outsourcing the approval of these applications to visa application centers in different countries, whereas you don't see that kind of discrepancy across other regions of the world. So in terms of the proportion of Francophone international students that are being we are really seeing it as a resource problem on the ground principally, and a communication issue around what exactly international students need to bring to the table to prove that they are willing and are financially ready to come to Canada. So really what we're advocating for is more transparency, more communication around the exact needs that international students need to provide at these visa application centers, and just more resources on the ground. We don't have the technical expertise in the Chinook system that some of the other experts seem to have, but from what we're hearing from anecdotal student stories is that it is a resourcing issue on the ground. But I'll hand it over to the other witness.
Time is up. We will now proceed to Ms. Kwan for 6 minutes. Ms. Kwan, you have 6 minutes. You can please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank you to all the witnesses for your presentations today. First, I'd like to go to Mr. Tao. In your presentation, you were just going to say something about ombudsperson. Could you finish that thought for me, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Kwan, for your question. If I were to summarize into one overarching first tangible steps, because I know the committee is looking for tangible steps, I think the appointment of an independent ombudsperson or an immigration commission, like the Human Rights Commission in various provinces, where there's a tribunal that does the work, but a commission that studies the issue, it would allow for those recommendations that I put forward to be acted upon. And the importance is that separation, that independence. Those that are creating the rules and creating the systems can't be the only people in check to review them at the same time. There needs to be some independence. There needs to be experts. There needs to be academics involved. There needs to be the public, media, all the stakeholders need to be part of that. And I think the commission allows, or an ombudsperson allows for that to happen.
Thank you very much. I'll just quickly go to the other witnesses on the same questions. Would you agree that IRCC needs an independent ombudsperson to be in place? I'll first go to Mr. Denzellen.
Thank you, Madam Kwan. Absolutely agree with the idea that there should be an ombudsperson who can independently review from time to time the decisions that are taken in IRCC. And to actually go back to Mr. Brunel Ducep's point in regard to resourcing and transparency, I think having that ombudsperson is very important because it will crack open that black box, especially in West Africa and countries. For example, just to clarify this, Dakar, there's only one office that deals with most of the applications coming in from West Africa. What's going on? That ombudsperson can go in there and actually find out.
Thank you. Just very quickly, Mr. Fontaine, on the same question, and then I need to ask further questions around the issue.
Thank you, MP Kwan, and I'll go straight to it. Similar to what Mr. Tao and Mr. Dengzalin have said, more transparency needs to occur within IRCC, and CASA always believes more oversight is a good thing. So I'll keep it at that. But it's also been said, a lot of the, yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to actually, I have limited time, so I do want to get these other questions in. On the Chinook issue, one of the issues, as I understand, with this artificial intelligence system is that it uses certain words or phrases to flag applications, to red flag applications. And so given that with the Polera report, we know that there are internal biases and stereotype attitudes within IRCC. Do you see this as a problem where IRCCs themselves have people creating this artificial intelligence system, that those biases could be embedded into these systems and therefore create differential outcomes, or I would even argue discriminatory outcomes targeted towards certain countries? So from that perspective, what do you think are the certain words or phrases that are used that is problematic within the Chinook system, and especially in the case of African countries and Franco-African applicants? Mr. Tao?
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. I'll keep my answer really quick. It's a black box. And I think that that's a problem because they're saying Chinook is not AI and therefore it doesn't need the oversight. And the process of adding risk words is like applying for a volunteer job. You put a name forward, a word forward, and it's decided by an internal committee, and that's it. There's no independent oversight. So I think it's highly problematic in light of the report that you cited.
Okay, now on this issue, the one of the assessments from IRCC on applications is whether or not they have close ties back home. Do they have the financial resources? And what country is it from? What region is it from? And so on. These are triggering aspects that generates, I think, a response that generally says they are denied on the grounds that they do not believe that they will return home at the end of their study. That's the outcome that we're seeing, right? With only a 26% approval rate, that speaks for itself. Now, on this note, because you're a student, because the stage of life that you're in, you may not be married, right? I mean, is that not in and of itself tells you there's an inherent bias within the system that IRCC should be looking at? Mr. And then I'll go to Mr. Dengzalin.
Absolutely. And I think it's actually intersectional. So I highlight in my brief, the young, single, mobile, without dependence. I think that's a very harmful speech line to even tell, a high school graduate student or someone who's coming for first year studies. So yes, I agree with you, Member Kwan. We need to work on that, and we need to figure out what the biases behind those refusal grounds are.
Mr. Dengzalin?
I will reiterate what Mr. Tao has just said, but I will also add that in the history of Chinook, what we found out, at least from the snippets of emails we've received through ATIP disclosures, is that QA, or quality assurance, was actually an afterthought. They just cobbled together the software out of Excel, and oops, we need to do QA before we get litigated. And it's funny because Mr. Tao already highlighted that it was introduced by way of litigation. What does that say about a system?
Yeah, what we know, of course, is that the Chinook system has really brought this to the forefront in many ways, although the government did it all behind closed doors and it took a litigation for it to be exposed. But I believe that same sentiments being applied before Chinook. Would you agree with that, Mr. Tao and Mr. Dengzalin, very quickly?
Absolutely. And I think the pandemic has made it worse because the borders have served as a color line.
Mr. Dengzalin?
Absolutely agree with it.
Okay.
Sorry for interrupting. Your time is up, Ms. Kwan. Okay, based on the time, we will have a quick one question from each party before we finish this panel and invite our witnesses from the second panel. So 1 minute for each of the party. We will start with MP Redekop. MP Redekop, one quick question. You will have a minute for your intervention. You can please proceed.
Thanks. My questions are for Mr. Fotang and Mr. Malte. The direct student stream is open from a variety of countries. 56% of the students came from India and China. Just like to know what you think the value of the student direct stream brings to Canada.
Jared, would you like to take that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to take that. And, we believe that bringing international students from a variety of countries, especially through a process like the Student Direct Stream, which obviously accelerates that process, is good for Canada. It's great for the Canadian economy at large, as we're bringing in great talent and people who can contribute to the future of the Canadian economy while they're studying here and after they graduate as they look to set out their career.
Your time is up. We will now proceed to Mr. Dhaliwal. Quick one question. You have a minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I hear many sad and troubling stories of international students being victims of exploitation, trafficking, and harassment. And I have read these reports in the media, and it's putting a lot of pressure on international students that has led to a rise in suicide rates across Canada. Could the witnesses tell us how the stakeholders involved, whether government, post-secondary institutions, or those in the immigration field, can address and better support these vulnerable foreign students?
I can begin by answering the question really quickly, Member Dhaliwal. Up to a third to a quarter of tuition money is being offshored to agents who have no authorization to practice immigration for the services they provide. If that money was transferred into mental health support and into support at these schools, it would make a world of difference. And I would suggest that looking into that system is crucial to solving your problem.
If I may add, Member Dhaliwal, what's interesting is my conversations
sorry for interrupting. Time is up. We will now proceed to Mr. Brunel Desap. Mr. Brunel Desap, you will have a minute to ask one quick question.
Yes. And it goes without saying, I imagine that each request should be dealt with independently of other requests that preceded it. So I'm wondering to what extent external factors to the request can have an impact on the refusal of the work permit request, for example. Isn't there an issue, a discrimination issue, when we look at where people are from, especially Francophone West African countries, because there are external factors? Mr. Dengzalen, please. Thank you. Yes, quickly. The external factors are extremely important in this analysis, and the problem is that we don't have the framework used. So I repeat, it's a black box. We don't know. We don't know many things on this, actually. Mr. Dow, perhaps?
I think we will have to proceed to Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, you have 1 minute to ask one quick question. You can please proceed.
Section 22.2 on the dual intent explicitly says that the intention to remain in Canada does not prevent a foreign national from becoming a temporary resident upon proof that they'll have left Canada by the end of their authorized period of stay. But yet, the vast majority of the people rejected on the grounds that IRCC does not believe that they will leave at the end of their stay. Isn't that a direct contradiction of dual intent? And what action needs to be taken to fix this dual intent problem? Mr. Tal and then Mr. Denzellen.
Mr. Tal?
You are on mute.
I'll try in 30 seconds. Sorry, I apologize. I'll try in 30 seconds. family ties, saying that someone comes with their family members and how many family members they leave behind, their finances, all the things they need to actually study. I think that there's a misassessment of those factors, and that's leading to dual intent refusals. I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Denzalin?
The problem with the dual intent analysis that they are using right now is it's not as robust as it should be. The policy intervention is that they should revisit this, and there should be input from the committee in terms of how this is actually laid out.
Sorry, when you say committee,
sorry for interrupting, Ms. Kwan. Sorry for interrupting.
Sorry. Yes, I just wanted to hear Mr. Denzalin. Did he say stakeholders? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So with this, our first panel comes to an end, and I want to, on behalf of all the members of this committee, I would like to thank all our witnesses for providing an important input. If there is anything you would like to provide further information to the committee and you are not able to speak about because of the shortage of time, you can always send a written submission to the clerk of the committee, and that will be circulated to all the members, and we will take into consideration while we draft our report. So with that, we will suspend the meeting for a few minutes so that the sound checks can be done for our next panel. Thank you once again to the witnesses. I will suspend the meeting for a few minutes. Thank you.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Merci. Thank you very much to our witnesses.
Good morning, everyone. I call the meeting to order. We will hear from 3 witnesses in this panel, and on behalf of all the members of this committee, I would like to welcome our witnesses for appearing before the committee. We will be hearing from Mr. Alain Dupes, Director General, Fédération des CIMM francophones et Académie du Canada. And the second witness for today is Martin Norman, Director, Strategic Research and International Relations, representing Association des Collèges et Universités La Francophone Canadienne. And our third witness for this panel is Thibault Camara, President La Québec et New UC. I would like to make few comments for the benefit of our witnesses. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize your name. When you are ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Interpretation in this video conference will work very much like a regular committee meeting. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. So I welcome all our witnesses for today, and I would request Alain Dupes to please proceed. All the witnesses will be provided with 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and then we will proceed to the round of questioning. Alain Dupes, you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. Please proceed.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, members of Parliament, thank you. Thank you for inviting the FCFA to appear today. I'm in Ottawa on the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin peoples. The FCFA is a national and international voice of 2.7 million French-speaking minority Canadians in 9 provinces and 3 territories. It is also the main advocate for immigration to Francophone minority communities. Since 2002, supporting the development and vitality of our communities has been one of the objectives of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act of Canada. In 2003, the federal government set a target of having 4.4% of immigrants admitted to the country each year be French-speaking and settle in our communities. The government has never succeeded in reaching this target. According to the Official Languages Commissioner, if it had given itself the tools to do so, it could have welcomed 76,000 more immigrants from outside Quebec. In fact, the demographic weight of the Canadian francophonie has dropped from 4.4% in 2001 to less than 3.8% in 2016. If this trend continues, Statistics Canada estimates that this proportion will go down to 3.1% by 2036. This in the midst of a serious labor shortage for the Canadian francophonie, and this affects all sectors. This is what makes the issue of the refusal of applications from francophones from Africa who want to study in Canada all the more frustrating. There's, of course, a human factor. We're talking about individuals who put a considerable amount of resource and efforts into these applications, and for whom a refusal is both incomprehensible and a bitter disappointment. They're from the continent where 60% of the world's French speakers live, and where the French-speaking world is expected to grow. They have often attended reputable universities in their home countries. They have skills that are in demand in Canada and in our communities. But we're shutting the doors to them. We're creating a bottleneck. The Canadian Visa Office in Dakar serves a total of 16 countries and a pool of 276 million people. It's one of the highest ratios for a Canadian visa office in the world. Then, there are other reasons these applicants are given when their applications are rejected. They're essentially told that they have not demonstrated that they will return to their country of origin after their studies. This is in direct contradiction with the government's objectives for Francophone immigration and the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. It is incomprehensible that the government does not seek to retain these students and encourage their transition to permanent residency so that they can increase the vitality of the Canadian francophonie. These visa denials are the kind of tiny gestures that erode the Francophone and Acadian communities rather than contributing to their development. It also illustrates how the target of 4.4% for Francophone immigration is not part of the overall priorities of the department. To achieve this target, a Francophone lens with set targets must be applied to all potential avenues to immigration, including international students, temporary workers, refugees, and family reunification. We recommend 4 things today. 1. Conduct a review of student visa eligibility criteria using a Francophone and geographic lens in order to identify and correct systemic discrimination that might exist against French-speaking African students. 2. Substantially increase visa processing capacity in French-speaking African countries to facilitate the processing of applications. 3. To issue a directive to all Canadian visa offices to remind them of the government's obligations in terms of Francophone immigration, as well as the objective of encouraging the retention of these students in Canada after their graduation. And 4. To make permanent the temporary bridge opened in 2021 between temporary residence and permanent residency for French-speaking people outside of Quebec. Essentially, what we're asking is that the measures in place support Canada's Francophone immigration objectives, not undermine them. We are asking for consistency.
We will now proceed to Mr. Norman. Mr. Norman, you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You can please proceed. Mr. Norman, you are on mute.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Okay. Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, the Association des collèges et universités de la francophonie canadienne brings together the 22 francophone or bilingual post-secondary institutions in 8 provinces. Our international activities are divided in 3 parts: marketing, support for the recruitment of an international clientele, and canvassing federal institutions with international mandates to explain the reality of our network. In a statement on December the 1st, we indicated that our member institutions are facing the same difficulties as Quebec institutions in admitting French-speaking international students to Canada for whom offers of admission have been confirmed. Moreover, this issue has been documented within our network for a long time. Some institutions began to receive funding from the federal government after 2006 to engage in international recruitment. They were quickly confronted with the problem we're discussing today. Many of the students they recruited and to whom they applied for admission were then denied study permits. Institutions do not always know the reasons why their offers of admission do not translate into enrollments unless rejected applicants share with them. And of course, not all of them do that. Other avenues will need to be explored to collect this data, but the partial picture we're beginning to see speaks for itself. Here's an example from one of our institution's undergraduate programs for the past 5 years. Of all the applications for which an offer of admission was made, 77% of the applications from African countries did not translate into enrollment, while this proportion drops to 39% for students from other countries. In short, African applications do not translate into enrollment twice as often as students from other countries. The reason that the conversion rate from offers to enrollments is so low for applications from African countries is that a large proportion of them have been denied study permits. One of the contentious issues in the assessment of files is the possibility of staying in Canada after graduation. Both our association and our networks are encouraged by IRCC to promote the possibility of applying for permanent residency upon completion of studies, particularly to meet targeted labor needs, but also to support government efforts to reach the target for Francophone immigration. Frequently, the reason used to reject applications for study permits is that the applicant is unable to demonstrate through his or her file that he or she plans to leave Canada at the end of the stay. You'll understand that the repeated use of this reason to refuse a study permit is not at all consistent with the message we are asked to convey abroad. However, another element specific to our network of institutions must be added: lack of awareness in the public system. Institutions have told us that applications were refused because the officer assessing the file did not consider that wanting to study in French outside Quebec was a legitimate course of action. This is a substantial disadvantage for our institutions. This can create reputational risks. On one hand, our member institutions put their own reputations on the line when they engage in international recruitment. But repeatedly, individuals who engage in the process and receive applications are denied entry in the country. On the other hand, much international recruitment activity is done under the umbrella of the EduCanada brand, which is part of Global Affairs Canada. This brand is also at reputational risk when people who see it as a sign of trust are disappointed and then have to rethink their study plans. Our analyses show that despite the Canadian government's public policy objectives for international student recruitment and immigration, there are many systemic barriers to Francophone international students wishing to study outside of Quebec. Only the development of a coherent and systemic approach by the Canadian government will address the problem. We make a recommendation that the Privy Council Office, in conjunction with Global Affairs, IRCC, and other departments concerned with this issue, ensure that a coherent and systemic approach is put in place to ensure substantive equality in the treatment by the Canadian government of requests from international students wishing to study French. And I can provide the committee with more information if requested. Thank you.
Ms. Lalonde, you have some question?
Unfortunately, it seemed like the end of Mr. Normand's presentation, maybe the 15 seconds, there was some miscommunication with the internet. I certainly couldn't hear just live here in this room what Mr. Normand stated. I'm so
okay,
sorry.
We can give him 30 seconds to please repeat. Mr. Normand, we will give you quick 30 seconds if you can repeat your last part.
Merci.
Yes, thank you. So our analysis demonstrate that despite government policies over a long term, the Francophone candidates wishing to study in French in Canada and post-secondary institutions in the Francophonie are facing systemic barriers. Only a political and administrative intervention is possible. So we're asking, with Global Affairs Canada, IRCC, and other departments concerned, the Privy Council Office ensure the implementation of a coherent and systemic approach in order to ensure true equality in the treatment by the Canadian government of requests made by international students wanting to study in French. It will be my pleasure to present other information if requested.
Thanks for your presentation. We will now proceed to Mr. Camara. Mr. Camara, you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Bonjour, Madame la Présidente.
Hello, I'm in Montreal. I would like to thank the members of the Standing Committee on Immigration and Citizenship for giving us the opportunity to present the recommendations of our organization. We are a non-profit organization that works to defend the rights and living conditions of immigrants in Quebec by bringing the voices of our communities to the forefront in a nonpartisan manner by valuing immigration in Quebec society. Today, I'm speaking on behalf of tens of thousands of people who are experiencing injustice, unreasonable delays, and arbitrary decisions by a department that no longer seems to have the means to fulfill its ambitions. My voice will surely be stronger and more emotional because we live these dramas, and I want to describe the distress of the community. We're talking about extremely high rate of refusal of study permits for French-speaking students from some African countries. I would like to focus on the underlying principle. Canada does not believe that these students will leave the country after their studies. The officer is applying paragraph B of Immigration 179 regulations as a rule. Yet, Canada does everything in its power to keep The interpreter is sorry, but he's speaking extremely fast. Could we ask the gentleman to slow down a bit?
Sorry for interrupting. Can I please ask you to stop for a second? We just need to check.
Could we just ask him to slow down a smidge?
Mr. Kamara, if you can speak a bit slower, because the interpreters are having difficulty getting your speech. So if you can speak a bit slowly so that it allows the interpreters for the interpretation. Thank you. You can please proceed now.
In 2021, the Government of Canada even put in place an exceptional program to allow tens of thousands of French-speaking graduates of Canadian institutions to apply for permanent residency, even without a proof of employment. Finally, just this Monday, Minister Fraser himself stated that international students make excellent permanent residents. It is clear that Canada is committing to retaining the international students selected by its institutions. However, when it comes to nationals, inaudible.
Sorry for interrupting. I think there's some interpretation issue. If you can please stop for a second. Ms. Lalonde? Okay, please continue.
It is clear that the notion of dual intent gives disproportionate discretion to IRCC officers, leaving room for the expression of discriminatory biases because this regulation only applies to a portion of students, generally those who need a visa. This is also an issue in the processing of sponsorship files, always affecting the same people. Second, we wish to alert the committee on the lack of transparency and the arbitrary nature of the decisions made by IRCC officers. It's impossible to know precisely how decisions on study permits are made, and some federal court decisions show that these decisions are sometimes not justified. The AQAADI has shown that of 25 visa denial decisions from the Accra, Ghana office that have been challenged in federal court, the court has upheld 23. That means that almost all of the applications that were denied should have actually been accepted. This is just a sample of the major issue we face today. Not every denied application should have to go to federal court for what should be a simple study permit application. We request the clear and explicit publication of the guidelines given to IRCC agents and the criteria for accepting study permits and study visas. The Chinook artificial intelligence system appears to be unobtrusively reinforcing discriminatory biases. In the context of an employee report on anti-racism, IRCC employees were concerned that some manifestations of racism, even subtle ones, can have an impact on the processing of cases for immigration. The different refusal rates from country to country were even given as an example. We have evidence that racial bias affects the processing of cases and that discrimination by country of residence exists at IRCC. Today, we come before you with important concerns, but we bring pragmatic and structural solutions. Over the short term, an immediate halt to the use of Chinook software, clear and explicit publication of the guidelines given to IRCC officers, and the establishment of a mechanism for the reimbursement of tuition fees incurred by individuals whose applications for study permits have been denied. In the medium term, a substantial increase in the budget given to IRCC. IRCC needs more resources to meet its own targets, but also to do so humanely and decently for both agents and applicants. And finally, the introduction of a bill to create the position of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada Ombudsman. More clarity and transparency can only serve Canada and the people who wish to settle here. Inaudible. We have already...
Interrupting. Sorry for
Merci.
interrupting,
Nous avons hâte de
Mr. Kamara. Your time is up. We will now go to our round of questioning, and we will start our first round with Mr. Hallen. Mr. Hallen, you have 6 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses. My line of questioning will be for Mr. Thibault. I was reading through the report, and thank you so much for what you guys compiled. My first question is in regards to lack of resources that you've stated in the report. My question is, do you think that there is a link between maybe a lack of resources and this alarming report of racism within IRCC, that it might not just be a lack of resources, but also the work environment being toxic there that could be causing some of these issues that are happening with processing of files?
Merci beaucoup pour votre question.
Thank you for your question. It's clear that what we do recognize as an issue is that possibly the lack of resources brings agents to deal with files as quickly as possible and with the least amount of humanity and detail possible. It's not because there are racist behaviors, but what's happening is that there are biases, discriminatory biases incurred because people have to act quickly. And so our recommendation is clearly to invest in order to allow better processing of requests in a humane way, but also to allow the IRCC agents to take the time to deal with files with humanity and clarity.
I want to let you give you some time, because I know that this report was quite extensive, just to talk a little bit more about the Chinook tool itself, what your recommendation about putting it on pause for now, and any other related to your recommendations. I'll just leave the floor open to you, because I know there was a lot that you wanted to cover. Mr. Thibault.
Merci beaucoup pour la question sur l'outil Chinook.
Thank you for the question on the Chinook tool. Yes, we sent a brief detailing the current situation. The brief has been tabled and each member can read it, and I'm fully available to answer any extra questions. Now, with regards to the Chinook tool, what we recommend is that the Chinook system has been used since 2018, and this shows a lack of transparency. There was an article that revealed that with the use of Chinook, created without any oversight, this does not conserve any notes on the immigration officer's decisions and does not require them to show sufficient proof. So we're recommending a total stopping of the use of the Chinook system in order to take the time to understand the algorithms that were used for this AI system for selection. And then once we can show that there are no biases inherent in the system, we can use Chinook. We're also asking for the clear publication of all the rules and regulations that lead the IRCC officers' decisions, because they seem arbitrary and there is a huge lack of transparency.
Still have time? That was and thank you for that answer, but I think you hit the nail on the head that there's a lack of transparency, and in most cases it seems like the officer has too much power and too much authority without any consequences for some of the decisions that they're being made. Do you have any recommendations for solving some of these issues? Because these are the issues that we hear in our MPs' offices as well.
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you for this question. We do have a recommendation, and would like to insist on this, knowing that it's a recommendation that has already been made before the committee on the creation of an IRCC ombudsman. We recommend so that we will have more transparency and clarity, and this would be useful for Canada and those who want to settle. The Act exists, meetings have been held, and it will be our pleasure to collaborate with the Minister and the Parliamentary Secretary to Immigration. With the creation of an ombudsman, it would allow a review of decisions, and this would reduce the impact on ridings offices for all MPs, and we will be able to report on systemic issues. This will allow us to analyze what's happening, and also there will be increased transparency, and this also brings an answer to the recommendation of the CIMM report from May 2021, already asking for the creation of an ombudsman position.
Thank you, Mr. Thibault. I guess last question, would be about when you hear about the report, when we read your report, it's not always a francophone community from Africa that is being discriminated. Is there other groups that you think that are being discriminated against as well?
Je vous remercie pour la question.
Thank you for the question. I don't know how much time I have left, but I'll try to answer quickly. What we are able to understand is that there are many factors. Right now, the subject is on international students, Francophone and from African countries, but a compute review of countries might have to be done. But we do have examples.
Mr. Kamara, your time is up. We will now proceed to MP Kayabaga. MP Kayabaga, you will have 6 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Je vais juste commencer par remercier nos témoins.
I wanted to thank our witnesses. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing all your research with us. I'm going to start with Mr. Dupuis. You spoke about data, immigration data, and that if there is no concrete action, that there would be a reduction of numbers between now and 2036. How do you think that these figures, especially if you look at refusal rates for immigration and Francophone students, and African Francophone students, how do you think these refusal rates will impact this decline? And what level do we need to reach to make sure that the decline is stopped? Right. So the immigration target, 4.4%, was set out in 2003, and this was equivalent to the demographic weight of the Francophonie in the 2001 census. So the commissioner's report from last fall shows that if we wanted to maintain the demographic weight at 4.4%, there was a mistake made with 4.4. The target should have been higher than 4.4% in order to maintain the Francophone population outside of Quebec. This shows me the extent to which the target has to be reviewed upwards. We need a catch-up target because we can see, and the Commissioner was saying, the fact that we didn't reach the target in 2008, it was the first objective. This caused a shortfall of 76,000 people in our communities. It's the equivalent of the entire Francophone population of BC right now. Inaudible. So we were not able to welcome these people for 20 years. We need these objectives to be linked to international students. It's like the targets were not looked at during visa review. And oftentimes we're talking about this ability to show that one would return to the home country, but we would want for these new graduates to stay in Canada and contribute to the vitality of our communities and be able to find a job in fields where there's a labor shortage. So what we would want is the visa policy, be coherent with our immigration policies for Francophone citizens. And we want IRCC to do a formal review of the admission criteria in order to see if we need to change the criteria for mandatory return to the home country. It's not really coherent with Canada's official language targets. Yes, also you mentioned that 60% of Francophones are in Africa. So what is the connection between the decline? If you can how could you explain the fact that they're not recruiting these high numbers of French language people? We don't have numbers within the Francophone countries, especially not in Africa. There's a lack of capacity. I was saying in the presentation, the Dakar office has to deal with visa applications from 15 or 16 countries, 276 million as a population, and there's a lack of capacity. There's a lack of the world Francophone population will go up to 700 million people, and most of this growth will be in African countries, sub-Saharan Africa, but also in Maghreb. And so we need a strategy for international students that has to do with Francophone parts of Africa, but also a global strategy, and that the
Oui, merci beaucoup. Donc,
so there's no translation.
Yes. In seconds, there was no. In regards to interpretation, then we will proceed.
This is the interpretation. This is the interpretation.
For the interpreters?
Do you hear the translation now? Yes. Can you hear the interpretation now?
The last person, and if you can please repeat. Thank you. We'll start the clock again. Yes, please, if you can repeat the last 15-second presentation.
So in brief, I think that yes, world growth of the francophonie will mostly happen in Africa, so we need a coherent strategy that takes into account the policy and the objectives for francophone immigration of the Canadian government. So this has to include student visas, permits in French-speaking countries, but also promoting recruitment and other efforts. Thank you very much, Mr. Dupuis. I appreciate your comments. So if I can sum up what you said in your comments, we really have to be able to look at the problem of resources in Africa, because I think Mr. Camara was the one. No, it was you, actually, who mentioned a visa office in Senegal for 16 countries, which is something that should be changed. Mr. Camara, you talked about the Chinook program, and according to you, we should stop using it because there are problems. Problems have been identified. We want racism problems should be solved in that program. Do you?
So we will have to proceed to our next member. So we will now go to Mr. Brunel Desap. Mr. Brunel Desap, you will have 6 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Camara, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here for this very important study that's very important for me. So I listened to you, to all the witnesses, and Mr. Camara, I really liked what you said in your presentation. You have clear and precise recommendations for the committee, and some of them will probably end up in the committee's final report. If I heard you well, the federal government is working against Quebec's intention which is to welcome and keep foreign students. We saw a story like this in the media. And this is shocking because the shared jurisdiction in immigration should mean that the federal government and Quebec should be working together. Thank you for your question. Yes, French-speaking African students often receive scholarships from the Quebec government, and they are exempted from university school fees. And even if these scholarships are given, the student permit is rejected. So we ask two questions. When Quebec verifies the financial aspect and accepts it, afterwards IRCC will refuse for financial reasons. And second, students who are selected by designated institutions in Quebec are refused by Canada. This shows that there's a lack of coherence between the criteria on both levels. So when refusals are linked to the fact that an agent believes that the student will not go back to his or her country, when Quebec and Canada have strategies to retain these students, it's really troubling. So we have clear and precise recommendations, a dialogue between Quebec and Canada, and respect rigorously the 91 agreement between Quebec and Canada. Thank you. And I'll ask you for a quick response to this following question because I don't have much time. Can you explain the bilateral relation between the recruitment agents and IRCC? Can IRCC ask recruitment officers of institutions to what we see, if you're talking about recruitment agents, if that's your question, often there is not clear guidance. So we have people who recruit in African countries who promise that there will be rapid access to permanent residency, but it's not something that's realistic in fact. So what we suggest in our recommendations is the creation of a guide for the promotion that universities in Canada do abroad so that promises are not made that are broken. Mr. Normand, I was so surprised when I heard your presentation, so I want to make sure I understood well. Did you say earlier that agents had said that it was not a valid case to want to study in French outside Quebec? And if so, is this something that's widespread? Because this is discrimination if it's real. Thank you for your question. It's a situation that our member institutions have been observing since 15 years at least, that is refusing permits to African students. And we have anecdotal information showing that applications were rejected because agents decided that to study in French outside Quebec was not a legitimate school project. This is major because some agents IRCC are saying that it's not a valid project to want to study in French outside Quebec. I'm so surprised. I'm going to try not to fall out of my chair. And I think if I have one last question for all witnesses. Oh, Mr. Camara, can you tell me about the Ombudsman a bit more in detail because it's one of your important proposals? Yes. There is no Ombudsman for immigration and citizenship. So there are arbitrary and discretionary decisions. And some agents why are they in a better position than students or universities to say what is a credible school study project? And there's litigation in federal court, so things have to go to the courts, and also applicants go and see writing offices, and there's no democratic transparency. What we are putting forward would allow that there is accountability, that there's an analysis on systematic circumstances.
Merci infiniment.
Thank you. We will now proceed to Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, you will have 6 minutes. You can please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for their presentations. I'd like to follow up with Mr. Kamara. On the issue around Chinook, your recommendation is for the government to halt the use of it. What we heard with Chinook is that there are potentially inherent biases embedded in these artificial intelligence systems. Some of those biases are triggered by risk words that are identified in red flags. The large majority of the applications are rejected. With that in mind, would you agree that what the government needs to do is with any artificial intelligence systems that they put in place, that there be extensive consultation with stakeholders, and B, that there must be independent assessment of these tools?
Merci, Madame la députée.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. Yes, you're absolutely right. What we're asking is for stopping the use of Chinook so as to do an in-depth study and assessment of the parameters and to look for racist bias. I'm a data scientist myself, and this was my profession, to create models of risk predictions. And these models are based on presupposed humans. So when we create the risk concept, is that we reflect human elements. So rather than having the opportunity to start from scratch, we used a system to put in place human reflexes rather than basing this on real risks. So this is now being applied with these human, and well, they say it's not our fault, it's a black box, but what has been put inside is very well known. So yes, we need an independent study that is clear, transparent. We need to know what happens in this Chinook black box.
On that, with respect to IRCC's work, has a dual intent outlined for students and other applications as well. Even though with that dual intent, they say that is not grounds to reject people if they may want to stay, but yet the outcome is such that they reject people. So on that issue, would you agree that the government also needs to revise their dual intent parameters and also clearly instruct that IRCC officials should not reject applications just because people might have an intention to stay?
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. Indeed, we want to have a strict follow-up of Section 22.2 of the Articles on IRPA. So the issue is that this paragraph 69 of the IRPR gives a discretionary power which is disproportionate, and the officers use it to discriminate against part of the population, now in that case the Francophone African studies. So this is unacceptable, inaudible. We need to put all programs in place, and we need to make sure that there is no bias and no discrimination against these students. So yes, you are absolutely right.
that students had to pay their tuition, and especially during the pandemic. In your brief, you noted that IRCC said that they can enroll abroad, pay the tuition, enroll abroad while their application is being processed. Then many of them actually got rejected, to which they pay the tuition. And your recommendation was to have the government take responsibility for that. Am I correct? What are you suggesting exactly that the government should do in those instances?
Oui. Il y a eu un...
Well, there was an interruption of the sound, but if I understand correctly, well, what happened is that during the pandemic, there was a change of direction. IRCC has asked these students to pay tuition fees that have not yet received permits. So thousands have advanced the money, paid university, and in parallel, IRCC was continuing the processing of the permits. But for many, this permit was denied. So they had paid $16,000 for a year of study, and their student permit was refused in October, November, while the session had started. So IRCC has created that rule that forced the advanced payment and has not proposed to reimburse the students. So thousands of students have advanced the money and have received a negative denial and have never received reimbursement. So we recommend that IRCC sets up a reimbursement mechanism for all people having paid their tuition fees following IRCC's recommendation. And this is really major. It is a matter of reputation for Canada.
Thank you. I was really astounded, like Mr. Brunel Decept, with Mr. Norman's comment that individuals are being rejected.
Sorry for interrupting, Ms. Kwan. Your time is up. We will have to proceed to our next member. So based on the time, we will have 4 minutes each for Mr. Ridicop and Ms. Lalonde, and 2 minutes each for Mr. Brunel Decept and Ms. Kwan. So we will go to Mr. Ridicop. Mr. Ridicop, you will have 4 minutes. You can please proceed.
Thank you. I want to speak again about the student direct stream. This is the path that allows you to get a little quicker approval. I believe there's only 2 countries in Africa, Morocco and Senegal, that are part of the student direct stream. And when we look at rejection rates, I'd be curious to know of the rejection rate difference between countries that are part of the student direct stream and those who are not. Maybe for Mr. Dupuis, could you tell me any experience that you can relate regarding to Morocco and Senegal versus other Francophonie countries?
Well, unfortunately, I do not have this data with me today. But maybe Martin has something to say on that. Well, our member institutions have not shared this kind of data with us. Our institutions do their own recruitment and accompany some of the students, but we don't have that distinction between programs that are used to try to accelerate the arrival of foreign students in the country. Now, if you want, I have the figures. I can give you figures. So in 2019, Morocco, it was 44% of refusal, and in 2020, it was 46% refusal. For Senegal, it was 73% refusal in 2018 and 75% refusal in 2019, and I don't have the figures for 2021.
Mr. Camara, are those numbers noticeably different from countries that are not part of the student direct stream from your knowledge and from your experience?
Well, I will let it up to my colleagues to respond because I'm not so knowledgeable about this direct stream program. I don't have this information, unfortunately.
I know that we heard yesterday or on Tuesday, I believe, that Mr. Brown from Quebec CIGEPS saw that there was unfavorable treatment being applied to candidates from some of these countries when you look at rejection rates. So that's why I was asking the question there about that. What are some of the reasons some of the other reasons you think that we're experiencing these high rejection rates from some of the Francophone countries in Africa?
Well, the official reasons that are being explained are the financial capacities, which is not demonstrated, and of course this obligation to return to their country of origin following their graduation. And even post-secondary institutions don't have the reasons or information on these refusals. So we propose that there be a better exchange of information between IRCC and the institutions that would like to recruit students on the reasons for refusal, because the institutions will accompany and support the applicants, but they have no idea up to the point where they receive, where the students does not arrive, that they are being informed about the refusal, but the reason for the refusal, unfortunately, is not shared with the institution. So I think this would be important information that should be shared. I mean, it should be made public and should be shared with the institutions so that they can better support and accompany the foreign students. Well, I will also emphasize the situation of the Association of Lawyers. They were saying that the candidate would not leave the country for the following reasons, and that's very unclear. And with Chinook is even less clear. So, given the employment perspective,
time is up. We will have to proceed to Ms. Lalonde now. Ms. Lalonde, you will have 4 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Chair. I would like to thank our witnesses today. It is a real pleasure to see you again, and I wish you a happy new year. I only have 4 minutes. I will start with Mr. Normand. I think you have mentioned about various pathways. I would like to hear you on that. And you also know, and we've heard, that Canada is more and more popular as a country for foreign students, which is a good thing. So I'd like to hear you on proposals so as to improve the efficiency of the process and ultimately, of course, to reduce this refusal rate, which brings us to consider that issue. So what are the various pathways, and then answer to my other question. Thank you. Well, the first thing, IRCC should make sure that there is consistency between the messages that the recruitment teams are using and then the reasons that are used to refuse the study permits. So at IRCC, well, we should have the option to ask for permanent residency following the graduation. So inaudible. Sound is cutting. So we're doing our best, and our institutions make all the efforts, but our institution also recognize that they invest efforts in various countries where the refusal rates are very high. So as we have only scarce resources in our member institutions, sound is cutting. They know that the return on investment will be way too low, so they won't feel that it's necessary to make efforts.
An issue? Yeah, I think your internet is not stable. Are you wearing a proper headset, Mr. Norman?
Oui.
Yeah, if you can please continue, but speak a bit slowly so that we can get the interpretation done. Please proceed.
Tout à fait. Donc, la cohérence entre...
So consistency between the reasons for the refusal and the message that the RCC teams ask us to give abroad. Now, as we've mentioned a bit earlier with Mr. Brunel-Duceppe, it's also to have the network better known within the government apparatus so that in other occasions where a request is deemed non-credible regarding the wish to study in a given institution, because this is, of course, very harmful. It means that our institutions cannot do proper recruiting abroad. and cannot support the students towards a process of becoming permanent resident. What we need to understand here, a study that we did 2 years ago, shows that 80% of foreign students that study in institutions of Canadian francophonie wish to remain in Canada at the end of their studies. So this is a very important pool of potential candidates for permanent residency.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Normand. Mr. Dupuis, quickly, what do you have to say on the refusals if we look at the demographic weight of the francophonie outside of Quebec? Well, right now, the student visas are not counted in the 4.4% target, so a study would have to be undertaken to see what is the refusal rate, but it doesn't help. It doesn't help us to reach the target. But I would also like to add that there was a temporary openness last year between the temporary and then permanent residency. 7,000 francophones outside of Quebec use this way to reach a permanent residency, and so this allows them to stay in the country and to try to contribute to this 4% target. Thank you.
Your round of questioning, you can please.
Allez-y. Thank you. 2 minutes isn't a lot, but the minister told us, and the Minister of Immigration said that there were no fears, no reason to fear this file. There was no problem. So I'd like to give the 3 witnesses the chance to educate the minister. Mr. Cameron, Mr. Dupuis, and Mr. Normand, go ahead. What would you have to say to the minister who says, oh, there's nothing to worry about? Thank you. I'm going to answer quickly. Inaudible sound. So, yes, so what I was trying to explain is that there's a lot of mistrust with regards to IRCC from the immigrant community, and it's not only for students, it's also for qualified workers, temporary workers, universities, employers. There's a lot of mistrust. We want to be reassured by the minister, and this could start with a bill to create an ombudsman position. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, there is an issue. The refusal rates are huge for post-secondary institutions of the francophonie. 2 recommendations. We need to study the possibility of suspending this obligation of proving that they will return to their home country. This is making us unable to reach our targets. And secondly, we have to encourage cooperation and better exchange of information between post-secondary institutions and offices in Canada. We've seen pilot projects in some community colleges that have allowed not only to confirm with the support of the institution that students did have the necessary funds to study in Canada. We've even had a program where we were able to transfer funds through the university while the student was waiting for the student visa, and this helped. And secondly, the institution provided all the information required by the Dakar office in order to make sure that the correct information would be sent. Mr. Brunel-Decep, vous n'avez plus de temps. Maintenant, Madame Kwan. Madame Kwan, 2 minutes. 2 minutes et ensuite, on va mettre fin au panel. Madame Kwan, allez-y.
Thank you. My question is for Mr. Normand. I was just saying how shocked and disturbed I was to learn that Francophone-speaking student applicants are being rejected because they're aiming to study outside of Quebec. In light of this information, would you agree that we need to have a ombudsperson to look into a variety of issues, including systemic issues that might exist with IRCC?
Yes, this would be an interesting solution, and an ombudsman does solve individual problems. The problems that I'm talking about today are problems that our institutions are living through. So maybe this is not the best solution for institutions. I understand it might be in different cases, and that's in our specific case. We need to have better knowledge of the realities of the Francophone communities and legitimate ways that can be used by the institutions in the Canadian Francophone sector. Thank you.
Maybe I was misunderstood. I don't mean to say to have a ombudsperson to look at individual cases. What that tells me is that there's systemic issues within IRCC that is biased against students for certain criteria, including if you were French speaking, seeking to study outside of Quebec, that you could be rejected. That to me is a systemic issue. That's why I think we need an ombudsperson. I'd like to ask Mr. Dupree whether or not he thinks that we need to have an ombudsperson for IRCC.
Oui, nous serions d'accord.
Yes, we would agree with that, to have an ombudsman able to study some cases, but yes, also to look at the guidelines provided to the visa office and to make sure that there's no systemic discrimination towards Francophones and people from Africa. Thank you.
Federal outcomes, and especially in the
Sorry
courts
for
where
interrupting, Ms.
23...
Kwan. Sorry for interrupting. Your time is up. With that, our panel comes to an end, and on behalf of all the members of this committee, Mr. Seebeck, you have a question? We can't hear you, Mr. Seebeck.
I was on mute. No, I just wanted to raise something before you adjourn the committee. You can finish what you're doing, but I do want to raise something.
Okay. Ms. Kwan?
Sorry, I'll follow Mr. Seebeck. I also want to raise something. Okay. So,
on behalf of all the members, I want to thank all the witnesses for providing their important testimonies towards this study. If there is something you were not able to talk about and you would like to bring it to the committee's notice, you can send in a written submission to the clerk of the committee, and that submission will be distributed to all the members and will be taken into account when we draft the report. Okay, so we will quickly go to Mr. Seebeck.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to, I certainly understand the difficulties with translation of documents. We did receive the briefs for today via email at 11:18, and I'm just hoping that we can have those briefs in advance of meetings. I would have liked to have had a chance to read them. My question would have been far more informed, and I think the study then, of course, is better. So if at all possible, can we please get those briefs, the day before or even a few hours before?
Okay, thanks for bringing that to the notice. I'll discuss it with the clerk, and we will make sure that whatever communication can be made to the members, we will do it. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would certainly echo Mr. Seebeck's request. I noted not just for this meeting, but for the last meeting as well. We received documentations for this committee meeting after the meeting has started. In my case, as I'm zooming in, I'm not looking at all kinds of different computers and checking to see what documents have come in. So it would be really important for committee members to receive these documents at least, I think, a day in advance of the committee so that we can actually read this and be informed with the information around it, and so that we can ask questions and make best use of the time with witnesses. The other issue that I want to raise, Madam Chair, is this. Throughout both of these panels, it became apparently clear that with the Chinook system and its usage, that there is a potentially widespread problem with rejection rates with the Chinook system. And so it would be very useful for committee members to have some data to make that assessment. And so I would like to request through you, Madam Clerk, Madam Chair, to request to the ministry and to the departments to obtain this data since the inception of Chinook. How many applications and for it to be broken down by streams has the system assessed, and how many of them have been rejected, broken down by country, And so it's by stream and by country so that we actually know. The other thing I would like to have is with the Chinook system, what are the risk words or phrases that are utilized to flag or red flag applications, and broken down again by stream as well.
Thank you,
and
Ms.
for us to have that information, I think would be very useful in going forward.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kwan. We will. I'll make sure that that request is put in. And in regards to your distribution of documents for the last meeting, which we had on Tuesday, actually we had to adopt the subcommittee report that report had to be adopted. So the documents can only be sent after the subcommittee report is adopted. So that's why those documents were not sent before. So we will make sure that whatever documentation or the submissions we get from the witnesses, we will make sure that they are distributed to the members in time. Mr. Brunel Deshap.
Yes. A lot of things have been said by my colleagues, and there were things that I wanted to state, and so I support my colleagues in their statements. And I just want to add one thing, and I really don't want to tell you, Madam Chair. You don't hear me? Yes, no. Now I can hear you. Okay, so I was saying the extent to which I do appreciate your work, Madam Chair. I think you're doing an amazing job, but sometimes I think we could have a little bit less rigidity for time when a witness has almost ended the answer. I find that they're cut off very quickly, and sometimes I would really like them to be able to finish a sentence or have an extra couple of sentences rather than cutting them off. But I do appreciate your work very much, Madam Chair, and I'm sure that we'll be able to adapt. Thank you.
One minute and a 30-second warning and a stop card. So I hope members and the witnesses can start wrapping up when I give like a 1 minute and 30-second warning. And because we have to make sure that equal opportunity and equal time is provided to all the members. So many cases I have to interrupt. So we will see what we can, how we can work it out better. Yes, Mr. Brunel de Salle.
Yes. If you'll allow me, Madam Chair, it's because through Zoom, sometimes we don't see your little card. It's not your fault. We're all trying to adapt to the Zoom reality. So, I hear myself now. Okay, so I'm trying to concentrate, but okay. Maybe a little bit more flexibility to allow the witnesses so that they can end their sentence or their statement. Thank you.
Sure that we run this smoothly and everyone is accommodated, but we have to keep in mind so that we are fair to everyone. Okay, so thanks for bringing your concerns, and we will make sure that your concerns are looked into. With that, I once again thanks all the witnesses for appearing before this committee and providing important contributions. And the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Merci, au revoir.
Merci à nos témoins.
you.